Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Young. I'm just going to walk you through Price of Consumer Goods 101. I'm going to put a focus on cell phones, focus on potato chips, focus on beer, because they typically tend to be the area of focus when you're starting to deal with the generation between about 15 to early 30s in terms of where their focal point is. So I'm going to kind of drive you through some of the cost. Now, a lot of people don't understand a lot of things, and I'm not going to get into the futures in terms of how the commodity price market works, but I'm going to give it to you in a very clear and a succinct way. The commodity prices are usually set by a bunch of exchanges called Mercantile, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, the New York Mercantile Exchange, different exchanges where they set the price on this. And a lot of that price is based on supply and demand, volume of the crops, everything else in terms of that, and they're usually priced in US dollars. So if the Canadian dollar is losing value, that's going to push up the cost of commodity prices, which will push up the cost of goods sold. Same thing if we've had droughts or some issues with the oranges or broccoli where we had droughts where the supply is down, it will also push up the price of commodities in terms of the agricultural sector too as well. And since a lot of that's driven by US dollars, it will come as a part of the import pricing as part of the cost of goods sold. So you need to understand that. So when you go look at agricultural products, when you see cauliflower or something go up in value, a lot of that's being driven by droughts and higher price. Now I will talk about other things in terms of barley and all that haven't been impacted as much because the volume of wheat and barley has actually had a good crop season, so I'll talk about that. But what I want you to look at here is if you see down the bottom below chart, you'll see commodity prices, and you'll see where oil and gas, you'll see metals and minerals, you'll see forest product. With the biggest sectors that are taking the bulk of the bursts has been the oil and gas sector. But if you look at agricultural sector, it's only down a little bit. So let's talk about cell phones. This is a big area to people because most of you have cell phones. This shows you the total cost that you basically would see as part of the picking up an iPhone or an iPhone in general. So it's looking at the manufacturing costs, the operational expenses, and the wholesale retail market, and how much profit Apple wants to make on these phones. So that's what you're seeing here. Now if you think of raw materials, a bulk of the raw material is the lithium batteries. It's also other rare earths and metals that go in that. A bulk of that is also part of a commodity price that gets paid, but in US dollars is also reflected in that. And then you also see the other components to it in terms of the wireless radio, battery, power management. All these are the components to it. So these are all the things when you pick up the phone are part of the assembly of that phone. You also have what we call operational expenses where they've got R&D built into it. They probably got some administration costs built in there. That's what you're seeing there. And then because they're using possibly retail stores, they have a retail markup so the stores can make some money on it. And that's what you're seeing here. Now, like anything else, I'll get into at the end, impact of government policies, but I want to give you kind of a flow here. The next thing you're seeing here is potato chips. A lot of us like to sit on the couch and eat potato chips. Okay, well that's driven by commodities. You got soy, which is the oil in there, which is driven by soy prices. Now you'll see to the right hand side, based on the RBC index, you'll see what's happening in terms of potato, in terms of the value, in terms of the cost of those, as well as looking at canola and some of the other agricultural areas like corn. Again, a lot of that's driven by supply and demand and pricing. So that's where I'm getting into it a little bit. Then what we see there as part of the overall process is it's not so much the commodity, that's the raw materials these companies paid. Okay, what you're now seeing is the input costs. So the labor rates, where they have to manufacture, hydro rates, overhead, selling administration, that's the marketing and overhead that goes into the cost of that bag of potato chips that you may pay $1.50 retail at a grocery store. Okay, that's what you're seeing there. Let's talk about beer. Most of us like to go out and have a wobbly pop on a Friday night. It's driven by the price of barley. Well, barley's done well because it's one of those agricultures in Canada or Saskatchewan, Alberta and BC, Alberta and Manitoba, where we grow a lot of the barley. The barley's had good pricing, so you're probably seeing a little bit push up on that. But mostly what's going to drive the cost of beer is the overhead cost from the labor rates to the hydro rates. That's another thing that you don't hear talk about quite a bit, but you need to understand that impact as well. Now, this is a quick video to kind of show you the flow of commodity prices. What you do not see and what you do not understand, some of you, is that when government brings in new policy, whether it's hiking a corporate tax or changes the climate change taxes or any sort of other OPP, those become input costs for business. They become part of the cost of your goods because the business will pass those costs on to higher prices. Now you may not see that, and think that that doesn't happen, but in business that's what happens. Business does not absorb cost, they pass that cost on to the consumer. So if you're going to see climate change taxes come in, like Kathleen Wynn's talking about, then you're likely to see a 8 to 10% increase of your product costs, because everything right now is still driven by carbon, so you're going to see that into it. Hydro rates. Most provinces are now going to green energy, which is going to push up the cost of hydro, which will push up the input cost, which will push up the cost of goods sold, which will push up the selling prices of these goods. So you may not want to see this, and you may not want to hear what the Liberal government or the NDP government is saying, but the reality is that's how pricing works. Thank you.